to the 3-day refresher course on auditing standards. This program is being conducted by the Auditing and Assurance Standards Board of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and is being hosted by the Ernakulam branch of SIRC of ICAI. For the next coming 2 days also, we will be starting the session at 3 p.m. and it will go up to 6 p.m. May I request the chairman of Ernakulam branch of SIRC of ICAI, C.A. Ranjit Arware, to kindly welcome our speaker as well as the guests for the day. Over to you, Chairman.
Thank you, Secretary Madam. Very good afternoon to the most respected participants, to the very eminent speaker for the afternoon, and my very respected Managing Committee colleagues. As all of us know, it is the first day of the inaugural day of the 3-day National Refresher course on auditing standards, organized by the AASB, as Deepa rightly said, and hosted by the Ernakulam branch. As all of us know, probably the importance and impact of standards and auditing for the given point of time is a little shaky, as all of us know, for the chartered accountants in practice, especially for the given updates that we have from NAFRA and the revision in the tax audit slab and things like that. I'm sure it's a little skeptical for the moment. It's a little thoughtful for the moment. But I'm sure the participants here are, or most importantly, the participants for the standards on auditing are purely focused and specific on the kind of assignments that they would like to focus on. And that itself shows the kind of the importance of courses like this. Similarly, we've got another refresher course coming up on the next week on accounting standards there, where similarly could be on the same tone. I'm deeply thankful to the chairman of the AASB, G. Shekhar sir. So unfortunately, he couldn't join today. He is also, as you might know, on the board of the Airport Authority of India, and apparently they have a board meeting happening today. So I should be really grateful to G. Shekhar sir, and along with our Central Council member, Babu Abraham Kallival sir, who rightfully coordinated all of this together. So with this very few little words, let me take this good opportunity to welcome our very eminent speaker and very down-to-earth person. Couple of times that we got to interact over phone, the kind of simplicity that he maintains. Abhijit sir joining us from Mumbai with immense experience in various. I'm sure Deepa will read out a very beautiful profile of his. Wholeheartedly welcoming Abhijit Sanzgiri sir to the session today. Thank you so much for helping us with the session today.
Thank you for inviting me to share my views.
Though we've got around 80 plus registrations today, we'll hopefully see them joining very soon. So wholehearted welcome to the participants, very respected participants today, and my very eminent managing committee colleagues, secretary of the branch Deepa Varghese, immediate past chairman Roy Varghese sir, and past chairman Srinivasan PR sir for the session today. So pretty much it. Let's have a great time of afternoon learning on auditing standards. Back and over to you, Deepa madam.
Thank you, Chairman. It's my pleasure and privilege to introduce a speaker for the day, CA Abhijit Sanzgiri sir. He is a chartered accountant with 30 years of post-qualification experience, also a law graduate, and has been a speaker at various ICAI seminars for more than 2 decades now. He has worn many hats of an entrepreneur, an author, trustee, examiner, mentor, interviewer, senior corporate employee, you name it, he has done it. He also speaks on branding for chartered accountants. Sir is also a faculty of ICAI post-qualification certificate courses, contributor to guidance, speaks and spoken at CAG, IAM, at international platforms. With these words, sir, may I request you to kindly commence the session on SQC 1, SA 220 and SA 230. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share my experiences and views. Welcome to all the participants who have taken out their time and who are joining in. Let's also learn from all of you, because all of you have something to share, and every time I speak, somewhere there is some interaction and some feedback which I get, which also enhances my learning. At the same time, I also have to revise this, and this is something where we generally take these SQCs or the essays for granted because they've been written in so simplistic words. and they are so basic matter of facts or common sense that all of us know it. The point is that whether we really implement it in spirit and in letter of law is what we really need to look at. And whether we look at documentation, which we are talking in SA 230 from a perspective that we start making the documentation after the audit is over, or we complete the documentation before the audit is over, in the sense we've signed the accounts and then we've taken up the documentation. Maybe challenges of time, it's a practical reality that at a lot of times the appointments happen at the last minute. The data isn't ready given to us. We've not got feedbacks on various issues. So a lot of practical challenges. Let's see how we could navigate, or some best practices, or some practices which a lot of chartered accountants follow, and maybe over discussions which we have learned, maybe we could share them. Any good practice which any chartered accountant has, he could share. A key point which was put just before this, that currently we are on a shaky ground. I think quite apt to put it, as we are already facing or have faced probably the after effects of the pandemic, and maybe somewhere some businesses have closed down or have been badly hit, or some discontinuing operations which could be there. SA 570 needing quite a relook. So essays are something where we are basically focusing on, because that's where it all boils down to, when we got to prove that we did our work diligently. So that's one point about the essays. The second point is the regulatory approach. The regulators post maybe a couple of setbacks or scams, maybe the ILFS issue which happened, or maybe in Mumbai there was this PMC bank issue which happened. So as a result, the skepticism among regulators is also high. Yes, at certain points of time, there have been issues where, as professionals, we have been slightly behind as far as the quality of work was concerned. So it's time that we put all things back behind us and look at doing work. What we best know is auditing with the skill and with the quality that all chartered accountants are known for. So let's jump directly into the topic of what we are speaking about is SQC 1, SA 220 and SA 230. I'll take SQC 1 because SQC 1 and SA 220 overlap a lot. And technically, when you're doing SQC 1 and SA 220, technically you need to also document. So SA 230 will also be covered as a part of it. But let's speak on SA 230 also separately at the end. Any questions at any point of time, you can mute. I think the host can always unmute and ask me the question at that point of time itself, because I'll go straight in my presentation, because that will give a structured flow. And any point of time you could unmute, you could ask me questions, or if you have something additionally to contribute, I think that could be. So let's jump straight away.
So sorry.
There are certain abbreviations.
So sorry to interrupt you. Participants are requested to kindly note their questions on the Q&A box.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, so we will in between we will be asking you that also.
Sure, fine.
Thank you.
So certain abbreviations which we use in this QC quality control, these are the words which are quite frequently used. HFI, historical financial information, because SA is always about an audit of historical financial information. Code of ethics, again, very apt and very connected with the topic. FS, financial statements, engagement partner, continuing professional education. Let's quickly brush that. And now let's go to the various assignments that technically a chartered accountant does. An audit. In an audit, ideally a chartered accountant gives a positive assurance. He gives an opinion that the financial statements are free from material misstatements. And that's after an objective evaluation, after examination. So examines the books of accounts and evaluates the information which he has processed and expresses an opinion that gives a reasonable assurance. So the word is very clear. We give a reasonable assurance. It's never an absolute assurance, or maybe like a certification, it cannot also be a limited assurance. It's a reasonable assurance we give. Yes, at times the assurance may be modified. So we can give a qualified opinion, we can give an adverse opinion, or we can also give a disclaimer. So various series, the 700 series very clearly talk on when can we give an adverse opinion, when can we give a qualified opinion, when can we give a disclaimer. So that depends on the pervasiveness of basically the issue which we are handling. If it is across the board, then it will be a disclaimer. If it's restricted to a particular set, then it will be a qualified opinion. And if there is a lack of information which we have got, then ideally we'll have to give a disclaimer. So very clear when we give a disclaimer where there is inadequacy of information, adverse when it's pervasive all across, and qualified when it is negative or it modifies a particular part or a set of the financial statements. Now, apart from an audit, we have reviews, we have quarterly reviews, we have where we give a limited negative assurance that the financial statements ideally are believable, plausible, and nothing has come to our attention that the generally accepted accounting practices are not followed. And what we do here is purely analytical procedures and inquiries from the management. And apart from that, we are also doing some compilation work, which is presentation of financial statements purely based on the management representations. No major effort to verify the information in depth, and this is something where it's clearly mentioned as compilation of financial statements, and it's stated as such. And finally, you have a certification. We have a clear-cut guidance note which is issued September 2016. It's based on actual facts and figures. There is limited information that we need to certify, but we need to stress on the accuracy, and it's based on the examination of relevant records. So I always say that this certificate should always contain three things: what we did, how we did, and to what extent we checked. So this is something by common practice across the board. Having handled a lot of bank audits and having seen a lot of certificates issued by branch auditors as a central statutory auditor across the board, I've seen very few certificates which actually contain what we did, how we did, and to what extent we did. So maybe if you have used audit sampling, the extent of audit sampling done is not very clear. If we have checked particular information, we have not checked 100% of it, we have only done checks of certain areas, then that specific areas are not stated. So one of the biggest mistakes I would say that we do is that we do not qualify our statements that we make, and we make very generic assertions. So first takeaway I believe is please be mindful of what you are stating. If you have not done the 100% work, if it's by sampling, please state what is the sampling percentage, what is the number of cases that you have checked in number, maybe 10 files, 20 files, 30 cases, whatever it is, in terms of value, in terms of percentage. And then in that, if you have done checking in 5 areas, then state those areas what you have done. And based on that, yes, it's nothing has come to my attention or to my knowledge or belief that this is not correct, or whatever you would like to put it, the way it's been presented and it's been stated for us to give in the certificate. So very clear, please follow what you did, how you did, and to what extent you did when you make a certification. Now, coming back again to the standards of auditing. Standards of auditing is nothing but a guidance on the steps and procedures that need to be applied to address the audit objective. So each each standard would give us a certain step, it would give us a certain procedure. Now, when there is a guidance on what you need to do, I think it's very clear that you do what you're supposed to do. If you deviate from that, then the guidance also states that if you have deviated, please state that you have deviated from the standard. And one thing, please note that we very specifically state in our audit report that we conducted our audit in accordance with the standards of auditing. Now, when we ourselves make a statement, maybe in a few cases, I'm saying in a few cases, it might be cut pasted from the previous year, or we are just stating it very casually as a matter of fact in some cases. But in most of the cases, as true professionals, I firmly believe that we stand by what we do and we have correctly done the audit and adhered to all the standards of auditing in letter and spirit. So what the standard of auditing requires us to do, the documentation part or the checklist part and the addressing of that checklist is what we've done. So those steps and procedures have been followed by us. If we have not somewhere, then we need to maybe state it across the face of it for whatever reasons we could not follow it. Now, essays again are a yardstick for measuring audit quality. Now we are coming on standards of quality control. Again, let's look at what is quality, because quality may mean various things to various people. So somebody would say a 3-star or a 5-star or a 7-star, or maybe it might be a basic necessity, a hygiene, whatever you call it. Let's again, when we go to SQC, very specifically go and define what quality is. Now, compliance with SA, apart from the fact that we state so in our auditor's report, so we are making something which is our affidavit, or we give an indemnity to an extent that we've complied with the standards of auditing, but it's also mandatory under section 143(9) of the Companies Act. Now, leave aside the fact that certain essays, or there's a lot of talk of having, or even the ASBs contemplating having standards of auditing, separate standards, a slightly diluted version of these standards for small enterprises. Again, the NFRA consulting paper is out of exempting certain smaller companies from the requirements of audit. So if audit is not there, the standards will also not be there. But parallelly, even before this came in, our ASB was already working on a separate stage of standards for small and medium enterprises. So one is compliance with that as of date is mandatory. Now, the Accounting and Assurance Standards Board of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India has framed these standards. I've been fortunate to be a member of this ASB, a co-opted member for 1 year in the year 1819. So I've seen at close quarters how they actually go about doing it, and a very thorough professional process of brainstorming, of inviting feedback from various independent professionals, and then due diligence consideration by a larger committee, which actually then makes it the letter of the law as and the enforceability as these standards which are there, which we'll see shortly. And this is applicable only for an independent audit of historical financial information. So something which has happened, it's not something which is applicable to estimates or forecasts or futuristic compilations which are there. We need to mandatorily disclose this. If we don't, we could be held liable for professional misconduct as a part of the Institute's code of ethics, and maybe the peer reviewer could pass a stricture, the regulator could pass a stricture, and maybe we could face disciplinary action, and that could be as how severe or how pervasive that offense would be. Now, there are certain key assumptions or key judgments which we make in course of the standards of auditing. Certain key terms. One is skepticism. That's the level of doubt we could have, or the extent we need to verify and go in depth to audit the various statements that we do. Sufficient and adequate, appropriate examination. So it's sufficiency, appropriateness, and adequacy of examination. All three words in the literal dictionary meaning, it should be sufficient, it should be appropriate, and it should be adequate. And again, documentation. Again, let's look at documentation again in depth when we look at essay. The word used here also is an experienced auditor. So they're not using the word expert, they're using the word experience. So somebody who's spent a few hours, maybe 10,000 hours, you could put it, maybe somebody with about 15 years experience, nothing given, just subjective. But yes, somebody with experience, somebody who knows what he's doing, somebody who knows the standards of auditing, the accounting standards, and somebody who has the necessary skills, the necessary competency, the necessary integrity to conduct an audit and basically document things, evaluate, examine, form conclusions, and record what he has done. And by an examination of his records, somebody would be able to make a positive affirmation that this work was done with due and sufficient care. So that's what an experienced auditor is. Then the term audit risk. Audit risk again is a risk of something going wrong. So you are supposed to state that the accounts give a true and fair view. Accounts are free from material misstatements. Probably the accounts may not give a true and fair view. Probably the account may not be free from material misstatements. So you have a risk. Risk is always a function of probability and impact. So there's a probability that something may go wrong. And if it goes wrong, what would be the impact? So ideally, let's say you made a mistake and nobody's found it out. So yes, though there was a risk, nobody found it out. Maybe your good luck, no impact. But yes, there's a risk that somebody may find out. Somebody really finds it out, maybe a peer reviewer or from the NFRA or maybe from a regulator. And it takes really a very harsh view on it. You put your representations, but he's not going to accept it. He's not accepting it. And he may pass very strict strictures against you. So in such case, the risk is always there. The risk is omnipresent, omnipotent. There's nothing which is without a risk, because whatever you do, there's always a risk. So whenever there is a risk, you need to de-risk. So how do you actually de-risk? What exactly is the audit risk? Have you identified that risk? And having identified that risk, then what are the controls you're putting in place? One, by the design of the control, and the second is by effective and efficient implementation of the controls, which actually mitigates or reduces the risk. So that's what the risk is. Then whether the risk is pervasive all across the financial statement or maybe just some part of it. So it might be in one location. It might be in one line of business. It might be in one function. So it could be anywhere. It could be for a small part of it or maybe for a small time. It again would depend where it could be. So pervasiveness, whether it's all across or whether it's limited and restricted to certain areas, geographies, portions, functions, personnel, it would again be based on the facts and circumstances. And again, the word is substantive testing. So what are you actually testing? Are you testing completely in depth? Are you doing a transactional check or a process check? So when you're doing something which is substantive, you basically doing substance over form. So you're going right deep into it and actually finding out what the real essence is. So that's a brief about essay. The point is, are we just doing essays as a cut-paste exercise? So if one really introspects and maybe draws a percentage of how often standards of auditing are just used as a cut-paste exercise, and we really don't word it when we word it that we've really complied with the standards of auditing, because Ideally, the auditor's report para, apart from if we have any qualifications or emphasis of matter or other matters or can, the format doesn't change. So do we look at essay as a formatting cut-paste exercise, or do we look at essay as an independent fulfillment or an activity which we need to do, we need to document, we need to sign off, and then only we start preparing the auditor's report, which could be either modified or qualified, or it could be adverse, or it could be a disclaimer, or it could be a clean report. So we all need to see based on the adherence to the essays and the documentation also. Documentation is the heart, the soul, the core, the A to Z of the entire standard. So the standards, yes, you understand, you interpret, you need to do, but eventually you need to document, to evidence, to prove, to record, to substantiate, to let the whole world know that you did a really fine, a really great job. So that's what documentation is all about. And essays, as I said, they are based on audit logic and common sense. So if you look at the essays, all of us know what the essays are. It's not that we don't know what the essays are, but are we actually complying with the essay, both in spirit and letter of law? It's something we should really deep dive and really do that. Now, essays enhance the quality of audit invariably, obviously, because it's a structured, systematic flow. And wherever you are going on a structured, systematic flow, the chance of you missing out are less, in fact, remote. And if the chances of missing out are less, the fact that you would be at a risk will also be reduced. So doing the work in a structure, in a flow, and in accordance with your standards of auditing will definitely reduce the audit risk. You just can't miss out, because if there is a structure, it's not that you're just doing a tick box exercise. You're actually applying your mind, you're actually checking what needs to be done, and then what needs to be done, you're actually doing it and you're documenting it. Needed for peer review, needed for NFRA checks, yes. All the more when the heat is on and this is something where we are under the back foot, under pressure, we need to have very thorough documentation, and this is needed for all these external examiners who would be looking at the quality of our work. Now, one is it something which we studied just for the CA exams and forgot thereafter? Maybe even in my case, yes, to a large extent. It's only when I've been a faculty for this and when I need to read this that I'm really reading this over and over again, reading in between the lines, speaking a lot about it so that it gets firmly ingrained in my mindset. And it's like I walk the talk, or I do what I say. So it's practice what you preach. So a lot of advantages. I think in basically being a faculty is your understanding gets clearer, your concepts get clearer, you keep on studying, reading, writing about it. So it drills down into your working style. But yes, it's not something that it was something which we studied for our CA exams, and something like last week I spoke on the 800 series. And I came to know that this 800 series was not even there for the CA final exams. And if certain essays are not there even for our exams, then whether we have really read that, or we continue to read, continue to be updated, and continue to adapt and adopt this in our day-to-day practice so that it enhances the quality of our audit. It reduces our audit risk to a substantially large extent. And the second key which I would like you to stay away with is sign off the adherence to the essays before you sign off the financial statement sign off. So the checklists which are all given in the implementation guides, which is all there in the standards as what you need to document, please ensure you have documented this before you've signed off the accounts, or maybe if it's a bank audit, the long form audit report, or maybe the CARO in case of company audit, whatever you are signing off, the documentation in that respect, please ensure it's signed off. So the concepts of the working partner, the review partner, and then the quality control partner is basically signed off, all three of them on these work papers, and it's only based that you go and finally sign off the account. So if you go to any evolved firm, they would not directly, the senior partner will not come and discuss with the client. He will come with the client for discussion only when he has had a discussion with his teammates. They have compiled the work papers, he's seen the work papers, he has had his comfort that the work papers do address adequately and appropriately and sufficiently the evidence that which was needed to form an opinion. And once the audit manager has signed off, maybe the review partner or the working partner has signed off, then only he will sit with the client with the issues and then discuss with him. So that's the process ideally you need to follow and you need to do. So one is then the actual essays. Essays have a formal structure. They start with the introduction, the scope, the effective date, the objective, what you need to achieve by following this standards of auditing. There are definitions. Each essay would have key definitions. Then what are the requirements that the essay wants us to do? Then all application and other explanatory material for further clarification on how the essay is to be actually used and practiced. And then material modification vis-a-vis the international standards of auditing. So essays are based on the ISA, but in case whether there is a modification from the ISA, then what is the modification is something that we see in this point. So material modifications also becomes a part of the essay. So you could clearly compare it with the ISA and see how we differ locally. And then finally, the appendix and the illustrations, very key. Because appendix gives you the format, appendix gives you the checklists, appendix literally gives you a workflow that you need to just follow. So if there's a checklist, yes, have a checklist, ensure your adherence or the tick box to it, and then just go about your job, complete it. Sufficiency, appropriateness, and adequacy is always subjective. It would be from your part. So maybe somebody would do a 10-pager, somebody may do a 20-pager, somebody may do a 50-pager. The pager is not important. The point is that it is sufficient, adequate, and appropriateness for the audit under question. Whether it really addresses the key or the critical areas which were there, and how you formed your opinion based on this evaluation of this information is what you will need to record. So this is what the essay tells you to document, and this is where all the appendix, the appendices, or the illustrations are all about. Now let's take a break for a minute. Any questions at this stage before I jump into SQC 1 or audit committee?
No, sir, not at this point of time. No questions.
Fine. So let me start now with SQC 1, which is quality control. Now the first thing is, whenever I speak on any topic, I just go and find out the key words which are there. So one is the key word in quality control, one is quality and one is control. So let's look at what is quality. So quality is defined by ISO. ISO defines quality as the totality of features and characteristics in a product or service. So it talks of a high standard or level, or it talks about an ability to satisfy a stated or an implied need. So what we take very clearly from quality is a high standard or a high level. A minimum level will be adherence to the standards of auditing. That's a minimum must. Let's go ahead. It talks of judgment. It talks of a degree of excellence. And it talks of how good or bad something is. When we talk of judgment, what we are doing is we are expressing an opinion, and that opinion is after evaluation, which is after examination, and based on that we give a judgment, and that judgment is our audit opinion, and that judgment is drawn based on information. It is drawn based on analytics. It is drawn based on inquiry. It is drawn based on the representations we have had. It is based on the verifications, confirmations, reconciliations, all the control techniques, all the risk assessments that we have done. And the degree of excellence, how good or bad something is, we need to be really good at what we do, that there is no scope for error. Technically, you can look at whatever words we could, maybe Kaizen, maybe Six Sigma, maybe just in time, whatever we use to benchmark quality, but it's we got to be goddamn competent and goddamn really good at what we do. So that's what quality is all about. It's all about using a lot of adjectives. It's all about being exceptional, being impressive, being high grade, being unusual, being super, being wonderful, being awesome, being amazing, being exemplary, being polished, being tremendous, being incredible, being fine, good, great, decent, top class, first in class, marvelous, best, exclusive, reliable, available in time, the look and feel of it, how you exactly present without, maybe if it's written, no errors, no overrides, and then it's sustainable and maintainable over a period of time. It's not that you just show sparks of excellence. It has to be a continuous, sustained affair. If it's quality in work performance, it's to be throughout the audit. It can't just have one good day and maybe 9 bad days, or vice versa. There has to be no bad day in office, technically. It's a commitment to a niche. So we are auditors, we are professional chartered accountants, we have done our articleships for 3 years, we have studied these subjects, we really know what we do, and this is the niche where we know the things in and out, and we are committed to doing this. So one, it's a commitment to a niche. Now, various other terms would come to it. A predictable degree of uniformity and dependability. It's also the suitability and appropriateness for use. It is conforming to requirements. So here in this case, we are conforming to the requirements of the standards of auditing. There is a degree of dependability. So users who are relying on our audit opinion will find this reliable. Again, it's issued timely. Again, it's appropriate for the user. So, or if it's for a special class of user, then we issue special certifications. The 800 series will then come into play. So it's acceptable. This is appropriate. It's aspirational at times. The focus is on the client. The focus is on the regulator. The focus is on the stakeholder. It's also a leadership issue, as we could see in SQC. It's all about improvement. It's all about process improvement. It's all about continuous ongoing process improvement. It's all about people engagement. It's all about collaboration, communication, commitment. It's all about creativity. It's all about critical thinking. It's all about decision making. It's not all about having biases when you make a decision making. It's all about building relations, building rapport, getting the information quickly. It's all about benchmarking to best practices. It's not about perceptions. It's about actual facts and figures. It's about assurance. It's about control. Now, whenever there is a risk, you'll have the twin sister control coming with it. So it's risk minus control is what is the gaps. So when you have risk, you say you have the gross risks or the inherent risk. Then you have the controls which are to reduce, mitigate, transfer, or avoid the risk. You may have automated or manual controls. You may have proactive or reactive controls. You may have deterrent controls. You may have corrective controls. You may have collaborative controls. You may have various types of controls. Controls may be in place as a design, and they also would need to be implemented. So it's more not just the design of the control, but the effective implementation of the control that matters. And controls cannot be in isolation. Control will always be in relation to a risk. So risk minus controls is what you have the residual risk or the risk which is left over, which has to be, as they say, benchmark to your risk tolerance. So a residual risk always has to be less than the risk tolerance. As far as the inherent or the gross risk is concerned, that has to be less than your risk appetite. Risk appetite is nothing but the maximum amount of risk you're willing to take as a business as a whole. And risk tolerance is the maximum risk you can tolerate at an individual granular level, maybe at a transactional level. So risk tolerance will be a subset of risk appetite. Need to know these words very clearly. What's your risk appetite? What's your risk tolerance? So even a chartered accountant, it's something I really don't know what income tax or GST is all about. So I really don't have any appetite for doing it. So I would not take up a GST assignment. I would not take up a direct tax assignment because I really not in my area of core competency, not in my area of niche. So one really needs to know what is his risk appetite, what he's comfortable with, what he can de-risk, and that's how he goes about. So it's about your control. It's about the quality of the information and the experience you have. So it's not just experience, it's the quality of the experience. It's not about the information, it's the quality of the information you have from data. You have incomplete data, you have disjointed data. The analytics which will come in from that will always be garbage in, garbage out. So one is you need to have pure, clean data. You need to sanitize the data. And then only you will have something which is something which can really be useful to decision making. And from that, you could take some rational, logical, commonsensical decisions. So again, you have the various concepts of TQM, Kaizen, ISO, Six Sigma, Taguchi method, the Kansai, the zero waste, the defects program, something the TRIZ, BPR, OQRM, the quality circles, the top-down, bottoms-up approaches, various certifications which you will have as regards quality. So all of that would basically be a scientific measurement that you achieved something in a process quality. So have a look at that, where we would like to get ourselves certified or where we would like our audit client to be certified, how certified he is what we all need to see. Now let's take a 1 minute break and let's start actually the wordings of SQC1 effective 1st April 2009. Anything specific till date? I'm willing to take up. I'll just take a minute break and just have a glass of water, and I'll join you in a minute. In letter, but everywhere that we represent as a chartered accountant, I think we will have to represent quality, and in spirit, SQC1 will apply in all aspects of our professional life. So very broad-based, and the application of quality is also very broad-based. Now, SQC1 also has to be read with the requirements of the CA Act 1949, the Code of Ethics, and other relevant pronouncements which the ICAI will make from time to time. So SQC1 is not a standalone. It is a part read with our Chartered Accountants Act 1949, other relevant pronouncements of the ICAI, and also the Code of Ethics. And SA 220 is the synonym for that. SA 220 stands for quality control in an audit of financial statements. So when you're taking the audit part of it for historical financial information, SA 220 and SQC1 will be actually a mirror image of each other. So there's nothing to differentiate or differ from them. The only thing is SQC1 is much broader in application because it applies to reviews and other engagements also, whereas 220 will apply only for quality control for audits of financial statements. So that's the basic difference. SA 220 has a limited scope in that manner. SQC 1, it's much more broad-based, but SA 221, when you're talking of audits of a financial statement, you will have to apply SA 220 also and very broad-based SQC 1 also. Now, what are the objectives of SQC 1? The object of SQC 1 is to have a quality control design so that you provide reasonable assurance. And one, you comply with professional standards, you comply with the legal and regulatory requirements, so there is no miss. You do work with quality, you do work with high professional standards, and you adhere to all the legal and regulatory requirements. And the reports which are issued by the firm and the engagement partner is appropriate. It's appropriate to the circumstances. So if it's modified, yes, it's appropriate. It stands for what it says. If it's not qualified, it's a clean report. Yes, it's a true and fair presentation of facts. And then every firm should have quality control policies which are designed to achieve objectives, procedures, and to monitor and to ensure compliance with those policies. So one, have a quality control policy. So the first question which any peer reviewer will come and ask, show me the firm's quality control policy. If you don't have it, that's the first remark he will pass against you. Now, having said you have the policies, are the policies having procedures which also says how you monitor and ensure compliance with the policy? So it's not just having a policy. How are you ensuring adherence with the policy? So that's the next question which somebody will ask. That's what you need to do. Not just have policies, have procedures in place to ensure adherence to the policy. So it's policies and then it's procedures. Now, what quality control? That's up to the firm, depending upon the size, depending upon the operating characteristics, what kind of work it is doing, what part of a network it is, whether it's a standalone proprietary firm, whether it's a partnership firm, whether it's a multi-geographical location firm. You'll have different enhanced levels of quality control based on the nature of work you are doing, the geographical locations you are handling, the nature of clients you are handling. It all depends. The quality will depend to cover the extent of the work you are doing. Now, there are lots of definitions in this SQC1. One is what is an engagement? What do you actually mean by an engagement? That is, what is the assignment or what is the work you are supposed primarily to do? Documentation. So what is it that you will record? What it is that you will have as your work paper, working papers, whatever you call it. So that record which evidences what you have done. It's a file. It's maybe either in a soft copy or in a hard copy. It's the basis on which you have led evidence and the basis on which you have formed conclusions. So you have the concept of an engagement partner. You have a definition of what is quality control, what is a quality control review, who's a reviewer, what is a team. You have definitions of who's a firm, who's a partner in the firm, who should be the working personnel in the firm, and who are those suitably qualified external persons you should have in your team if you are not a specialist and you don't know all areas. So a lot of firms may have somebody who would be handling the IT part of it, somebody who would be handling the actuarial part of it, somebody who would be handling the GST part of it, somebody the tax part of it, somebody other technical part of it. So you will have a plethora of professionals working on basically an assignment basis and what exactly is their scope, their findings and how you have relied on them. Again, a matter of the 600 series relying on work of another auditor. But yes, here there has to be a quality. You've got to appoint somebody, or if somebody has already done the work, then how do you rely on his work? Inspection. If it's a listed entity, the requirements of quality control will obviously be much more, because there'll be a lot more stakeholders out there who would be relying on the audit which is done. Then how do you actually monitor? So what you are doing, how do you monitor quality? First is, how do you measure quality? How do you then monitor whether it's happening as per plan, there are no deviations? Then again, the concepts of what is a network, what is a network firm, concept of what are the professional standards, and what is reasonable assurance that we need to give. So this is all a part of what definitions the SQC throws out. Now, SQC is nothing but 6 elements. These 6 elements constitute the heart and the soul of the quality control system. The first element is leadership responsibilities for quality control within the firm. The second is ethical requirements. Third, acceptance and continuance of client relationship and specific engagement. Fourth is human resources. Fifth is engagement performance. And sixth is monitoring. Again, known. Nothing I'm telling you is something off the block. But let me repeat it again. Leadership responsibilities for quality control within the firm. The second is ethical requirements. Third is acceptance and continuance of client relationships and specific engagements. Fourth is human resources. Fifth is engagement performance. And sixth is monitoring. Now, why these are important, the 6 elements, is whenever you are drawing up your structure of quality control, it has to be based on all these 6 points. So when you are certifying that you have complied with SQC 1, then have you noted all these 6 elements and the checklist, the requirements of what each of these elements entails? Have you captured it in your documentation? And if somebody of a peer reviewer or an NFRA is come here, he's obviously going to ask you, what are your policies and procedures on ethical requirements? What is your human resources setup? How do you monitor and measure engagement performance? So this is all the questions which will be asked. This is the elements which are there in this SQC1. So we'll have to ensure that we have a documentation in place which addresses each one of these facts. So let's look at each one of them. So what is leadership? Now, who's a leader? Technically, if you are a proprietary firm, then the proprietor is the leader. If you are a firm, you are maybe a 2-partner firm. Let's say each of the partners, we would have a clear-cut scope, working area defined. One partner may handle this, one partner may handle taxation, one partner may handle audit. So as far as whoever is under the tax team, he's the leader. Who's under the audit team, some other partner would be the leader. Overall, they would both be leaders. They would have a common vision, and that's how they will need to take it forward. Now, one is there has to be an internal culture that recognizes quality. So how do you demonstrate that culture, and how do you recognize quality? So is it that do you have a policy? The policy is the basic document which you can create to demonstrate that you have an internal culture that recognizes quality. Then the responsibility is on whom? So fine, yes, the responsibility is on the managing partner who's doing the audit, but it has to be documented. You can't assume things, and you can't assume this is commonplace. Everything has to be put in black and white on paper, on mail, and it has to be recorded, documented, minuted. Now, again, the actionable should not be by fits and starts. They should be clear, they should be consistent, and they should be frequent. And also the messages that promote quality. So how often is your firm sending circulars, mailers on quality and the need to be qualitative at all times? And what is the firm policy for rewarding a person with high quality work? Is there a bonus system where somebody who's performed exceptionally well is rewarded? So it serves as an incentive also for others to do similar high quality work. How is the responsibility fixed? So somebody makes an error, if it's a team, then who exactly within the team has made the error? Now again, if you have made the error, it doesn't mean that it demands punishment. It also means there is a scope for review of where the training failed. So that's how one needs to look at from a leadership perspective. Fixation of responsibility, rewarding high quality work, the tone at the top, the zero tolerance for deviations of any kind. Leadership is all about communication, it's all about strategy, it's all about commitment, it's all about training. It's all about resources. It's all about available of resources at the right time. It's all about support. And this is where leadership, say in a pandemic situation, the leadership would be tested. You have work or you have some work which is not there because the clients have just not been able to organize things. And you have a set of articles who basically have left for their hometowns. You have your senior bankers or senior retired professionals in your team who can't travel because of the age. You have a whole lot of young professionals or articles in your team who can't travel maybe in Mumbai because unless you have had both your shots of vaccination and 14 days have passed, then you are not allowed to travel. Again, you are not allowed to travel taking a daily ticket. You have to take a pass. So the logistics, the cost changes. It's not that you cut corners on quality when your costs are increasing and there is competition and there are margin pressures. The key is don't accept this assignment. Is it something that ideally you would be able to handle it at that cost? So don't cut corners. I think that's where the leadership will have to put its foot down. Leadership will have to propagate quality, and that's where the second part, the client relationship, all parts are interrelated to each other, whether you like to do the engagement or continue the client relationship. So again, it's all about leadership who communicates, who strategizes, who trains, ensures the resources are available at right times, who leads from the front, the tone at the top, the zero tolerance for any ethical violations of frauds. That's what leadership is all about. The leadership that purely recognizes quality as non-negotiable, non-compromisable, something which is not just a must to have, apart from being a good to have. So that's what all leadership is all about. Somebody who takes the responsibility, somebody who leads from the front, somebody who's creative, somebody who thinks critically, somebody who takes decisions, somebody who doesn't have a bias, somebody who rewards, who's fair, who's objective, who's competent, there's no conflict of interest, who's transparent, who's honest, who has empathy. All qualities of a great leader, servant leadership, who's serving all the time. That's what leadership is all about. That's what leadership plays a very strong part when quality is concerned. Then come your ethical requirements. Ethical requirements of independence, objectivity, competency, confidentiality, professional behavior, and technically annual written confirmations that you have complied with the code of ethics. So each profession has his own ethical requirements. And if you look at Institute of Internal Auditors, they have 4 ethical requirements of independence, objectivity, competency, and confidentiality. Independence. Are we really independent when we do an audit? Or are we under pressure from the auditing not to qualify, or not to give a disclaimer, or not to do certain things. So independence, as we said, is a state of mind. How objective are we when we do our work? Whether we are not influenced by anybody, we do our work in the time which is allotted to us. If the time is insufficient, we really don't cut corners for that. So complete objectivity. We do it, it's an independent audit. It's independent, it's objective. And then whether we are competent, whether we have the necessary skills, whether we have the necessary industry knowledge, whether we have the necessary technical knowledge which is needed for certain audits. So if not, what are we doing to upgrade our competency? Now, it's not just competency of the partner, it's the competency of the team who's doing the audit, because the team is one who's in the thick of action. Now, if the partner knows the work, is it good enough in training his resources to be able to do the work? So this is what competency is all about. And then it's confidentiality of client data. Data is confidential. CIA, what we call of data, the C is the confidentiality, then is the integrity and the availability of data at all times. So have we maintained strict client secrecy? Not to share his information anywhere unless with his written consent and permission. Unless maybe the regulator overrides and he asks for information, but that's what confidentiality of client information is all about. And finally, we have professional behavior. It's not that we do work correctly, we also behave correctly. How we display ourselves as a professional, how we command respect of the society as a professional, how we command respect of the auditee as a professional. That's where we need to have our own respect. And when we are talking of objectivity, we need to be very objective whether we have the necessary skills. So again, all these elements are interrelated. Whether we have the necessary skills to do an audit, whether we have actually budgeted for the costs which would be involved in doing an audit and then quoted accordingly. I've seen in many cases where there is a tender system, and when you quoted X, somebody has quoted even lesser than 50% of it. When you know that anything beyond 80% would be at a complete loss. So how would you actually do this assignment? So this is something where you need to see this and actually get that done and see whether you would be actually be in a position to do that. So this is where annual written confirmations about compliance with the code of ethics is something we need to do. And professional behavior is maintaining the professional quality at all times. So all these 4 ethical requirements is whether as a firm, when we take an assignment, whether we would be able to be independent, objective, whether we have the necessary competency, whether we can maintain the necessary confidentiality of client data, whether we should display or we could display and we should display our best professional behavior at all times, which enhances the dignity and the pride in our profession is something what we need to see. Now, what are the threats to ethical requirements? So one is familiarity. Over a period of time, you may be so familiar with the audit and the personnel that you may not want to say something negative against them because there is a friendliness. Very often we've seen where the auditee is a friend or is a reference, and you would go to protect him and maybe not disclose certain things which need to be disclosed. So that's familiarity. Then is the advocacy. And you have advocated your position to such a large extent and you will not go against this position. So you basically not qualified an account in 1 year, maybe because you overlooked something, and then second year you find that yes, that it was worth qualifying, and just because you didn't qualify last year and you would be actually contradicting your own earlier opinion that you would not do it. That again, the advocacy would be a very key issue. Then will be the point of intimidation. Is the client really intimidating you to complete the work within a specified time? not giving you a data, not giving you the necessary cooperation, and in spite of that, you have deadlines and you need to do it, and then though it's a disclaimer that you have not got the information. It's basically because of the intimidation of not being given the audit next year or facing a reduction in fees or whatsoever, that you really don't do the work which is qualitatively needed. So that's one form of a threat which you have. Then you have a self-review threat. That technically you are reviewing your own work. Somewhere where you are an accountant, or at a lot of times where the client is so weak that you only end up as the accountant. And when you are the accountant, technically, can you audit the same function? So this is another issue which would be there, where you have the self-review coming in. Now, another requirement of rotation of engagement partners over 7 years. Yes, if you have partners, you could do it. If it's a proprietor, then you would need to see how you would do it. Maybe not apply directly to a proprietor, but then there will have to be an rotation of audit engagement in that case. What is your documentation on client acceptance and continuance? So why are you deciding to accept a client? Why are you deciding to continue a client if it's not a fresh appointment? So if something is hunky-dory about the client, there is adverse market information, or technically this would apply when somebody has resigned as an auditor and you are appointed as a fallback auditor. This is where the MCA or the SEBI looks at it, the NFRA or the peer reviewer would look at it like a hawkeye. So this documentation on client acceptance, especially in such cases, will have to be really stringently documented. Then you have client integrity due diligence. So whether you have done your due diligence on client integrity. Now that's something which needs to be documented. This is not just theory. This is something where you do your market intelligence, you find out on client integrity, and if you have reasons to doubt that the client doesn't have integrity, then whether you should accept the relationship or the assignment is something you need to basically document. And any conflicts of interest, ideally you need to document. So you need to review this point. You need to put it on record that there is no conflict of interest. And if at times that there is a conflict of interest, then you should have the necessary courage to withdraw from the engagement if there is an apparent conflict of interest at any point of time. Another policy is on HR. This is again a key policy which focuses on recruitment, which focuses on evaluation, it focuses on capabilities and competence, it focuses on career development and continuing professional education. It speaks on the policies of promotion. It speaks on the policies of compensation. And it also speaks about aspirations or estimation of personal needs. How many firms, how many small firms would have written policies for all this? I believe not many. Yes, we may have a guideline on how we would recruit, how we would evaluate, how we would develop competencies, how we would have a continuing professional education, how we would promote, how we would compensate, how we would fulfill aspirations. Either we would have just a cut-pasted HR policy taken from somewhere, or we may not have this in writing at all. SQC 1 clearly tells us that we should have a policy on record for all these things. And that's what a basic peer reviewer will just come and ask. And one doesn't need to be a great peer reviewer. One, if he just gets a hold of even this presentation, and if he just comes and, okay, show me your HR policies on these things, then this will be something where it will be basically questioned. So just let's take a pause for a minute. Just any questions at this stage, and just we'll discuss this. Fine? Yeah.
No, sir. No questions asked.
Just a minute, let's take a break. Just take
Sure, sure. Sure, sir. Sure.
seriously for 1.5 hours.
No worries, sir.
Fine. So one is if let's say you are a chartered accountant, Deepa, so let's have some conversation. So how would you say that this is something which is very basic? So recruitment, performance evaluation, capabilities and competence, career development, CP, promotion, compensation, estimation of personal needs. So the succession planning, or how would the professional want to go about? Now this is very basic. Now all of us know this. But how many CA firms, especially the proprietary firms, would have this documented in a structured manner? Now, this is not something which I'm giving as a best practice. This is the minimum requirement which the SQC tells us to have. So looking at that, I'm just conversation is, where do you think? Because I've spoken a lot all across India, and I've seen a lot of difference when it comes to documentation and also in structuring. As far as you go from a big city, let's say from Mumbai or Pune, again it will vary. From when you go to Pune to a smaller place like maybe Ahmednagar, it might vary. So I'm not saying it's universal, but the point is, a firm which is evolved, or a firm which is maybe smaller, but somebody who is following this. So it might be a small firm from a village, maybe in Kerala, which might be following this. And somebody in a bigger city also may not be following this. But largely, I have not seen a structure. When I've been as a peer reviewer, I've spoken as a peer reviewer or in the accounting standards or discussions with fellow chartered accountants, that though this is known, though this can be documented not even in 2 hours time, but it's not documented. So what's your view on this? How stringent is this documentation?
So I think it's a little tough, as I'm also a sole proprietor, and I'm also a peer reviewer. Frankly, in my firm, I don't have a written documented policy on HR.
Yeah, so one is, you are very clear when you're documenting, you need a CA. So when you're looking for a CA, you know what attributes you are looking for, and you would select somebody who falls in that attribute. But there is not a single pager which is written, okay, when I recruit, this is what I'll recruit or something. So it's finally, it all boils down to documentation. It all boils down to SA 230. It's not difficult. I think if you look at it, there is something what I'm just advising fellow professionals is, there is if you look at an implementation guide. So SQC 1 has an implementation guide, and in that implementation guide there is a checklist, there is an appendix. So what you could do is, you could just pick up that checklist, you could just pick up that appendix, you could have that as a left-hand column as a checklist, and just fill it up. There's no need that it needs to be a 10-pager, 20-pager document. It can be a simple 2-pager document which you can make in half an hour. So one is, you could just somebody to comply with SQC 1, you could just even take this template. You could just take this slide number 17 and just fill up, okay, on recruitment, this is what we will look into when we recruit. If it's a performance evaluation, this is what we'll look into when we'll evaluate a performance, maybe every 6 months or every year. Now, what happens is, in small firms, is somebody is doing good work and then he says he's past 6 months, and then he feels somebody is getting a raise, he asks you for a raise, and then fine, okay, you'll get a raise. So something happens not in a structured manner. We just are quite reactive. It's very natural, because a lot of us are proprietary professionals, or we are small firms, or what we have is that we have something where we're so busy with our work and with the competitive pressures and the margins, that we really don't get time to do this. And ideally, the SQCs of the world try to say that the quality control processes should be in place first. So something, if somebody really wants to implement, he says that maybe if you want to renew your license annually, just show your SQC policies in place and then licenses will be renewed. So I'm not suggesting anything. It's just, it's a close confidential discussion, but maybe yes, to drive it down. and there is some talk that you have something which is a scoring pattern which is being developed. So there's a self-assessment review and what you do. So there is a lot of this stuff which is happening. Again, as I would say, when you're looking at it, very simple, not very difficult to fill up. And maybe what you could do is next time you could have a workshop where you could have a 1 day's workshop where you could have something where maybe even me or somebody could have standardized templates which we follow circulated across, so that we just have that and just fill it up. So maybe in a day or two, the day that we spend in the workshop, we have the SQC one for a firm completely written up. So maybe you could think of that as your next workshop or your next seminar, which would directly be a practical help to somebody. So though this could also be a great help, is you could just take this any one of these slides, just put it on the left hand side and just start filling it up, and maybe that can become your SQC, because SQC is something which is nothing but your commitment to quality. It's just your control. Something quality control for a chartered accountant is always firmly ingrained in his mind. It only needs to come out on paper, and that's what it needs to do, and that's what documentation is all about. So somebody, if as all chartered accountants, when we are some of us are lawyers, we all know that when we make agreements, most of the lawyers use this fancy technical words, whereas if a CA does the same thing, he will try to make it as simple as he can. So it's making as simple as stuff as it can, that okay, our recruitment policies is that it's fair, it's objective, it's without any bias to any gender or caste, creed, sex, whatever. Then we evaluate performance on this criteria. This is how we competency is. We have maybe every 15 days we have a training session, or we encourage our teams to basically join the session. So it's something like the team who was directly reporting to me, and there is an audit we've just completed. We've completed our documentation, but the point is any additional documentation which we need to check, I've told my team, you join in, because you would also learn a lot of things from here. So this is where we encourage all our teams to join seminars like this, not just restricted to chartered accountants, and then maybe any learnings, any questions we could share, and we could just fill it up. So please feel free. I've shared this presentation. I'll share it again. I can even WhatsApp it to anybody who asks for it, and you can just use this as templates and fill this up and get your SQCs compiled. So the next point is on engagement teams. The point is on how you fix a team. So it's not just that we allocate anybody an audit because he's the one who's there, but then we have identified a particular role and we have assigned a particular responsibility to him, and that identification of a role and assignment of a responsibility is based on his set skills. So technically, if let's say I've identified and given X person a certain thing of drafting the report, is because that person's communication skills are better. Technically, there are certain people, so you have a mix of what you could say, a male and female in the team. The skill sets would differ, the strengths would differ. So you bring the strengths out of a person and ideally give him that role. At the same time, wherever there is an apparent weakness in somebody, it's not that you don't give him that role at all so that he continues to remain weak, but just have a blend of a strength and a weakness, so that the core work gets completed properly. So staff suitability and appropriateness, again, depending on the audit, what type of skill sets you need, and based on what skill sets you need, how exactly are you selecting your staff for that role. And then it's all about understanding what needs to be done, how is it to be done, why is it to be done, when it is to be done, and where it is to be done. So again, where with work from home, everything is gone for a total toss. And a lot of time you used to select staff also based on nearness to the geographical location of the client because it's convenient to them. Or a lot of people also used to join your firm because the firm was close to their place of residence. or maybe the place of in Mumbai, the place of where they would be taking their classes. Now this is all gone for a toss in the last 2 years. But yes, so the selection of engagement teams also used to be on a lot of criteria other than pure competency. It used to be primarily on availability. So it's high time that this also is factored in, and we work around. Or yes, given the choice that this only is the available team, then how do we within that available team, how do we strengthen their competency or skill sets, or how do we supervise and monitor them so that our work gets done correctly? And what's the methodology for the review of work? So how often do we do review? What is the in-depth review that we do? So at a lot of points of time, I've seen professionals who are going for reviewing the work and who are going and asking for what are the audit issues which are there, or what are the audit findings which are there. And technically, your junior will only report findings what he's found out. Now, if it doesn't have the competency to even find out certain things, then you will not end up doing a qualitative audit. So how do you assess the fact that your junior has really done an in-depth audit and has really found out issues which is there? So is it that a blend of, let's say there are 100 branches which are to be audited, then one branch you have audited, you have set the tone, you have derived a template, you have found out issues, or maybe it's a mix and match of there is one audit which you have done on your own, one audit with each of your team together, so they know by observing you what is to be done. So there'll be various techniques which each firm would follow, which each proprietor will follow as far as guiding his teammates is concerned. Maybe I would look to hear some best practices which even you would be following, because each of us would be having his own creative, innovative ways. I think the Indian system of jugaad, something, it's not a quick fix, but a real creative jugaad which works not just for an immediate short term, but it works quite for the medium or the long term is what we need to do. And then if the nature, timing and extent of the work which is done needs to be revised and you need to do in-depth reviews from what you've done, then you need to do a course correction immediately. It's like switching gears. So technically in a T20, if you need to win and need 50 runs of the last 4 overs, immediately you need to shift your gears from maybe a third gear to the sixth or the seventh gear. Technically, just hit every ball out of the park. That's what you might need to do. Again, why should such a situation even come that a work which is important should become urgent? So ideally, something which is important should remain important. There should be no firefighting or putting in the late night hours or doing extra hours at the last minute. Yes, at times, suddenly it happens that the client requests signing to be done on a deadline, and you are not prepared for it because of the fact that the data has not been checked. So this is where the client pressures would come in. As a professional, need to balance this. Especially we've seen this in bank audits, the statutory bank branch audits where one needs to sign off within 7 days, 8 days. Again, there are a lot of guidances are issued that you really don't succumb to those work pressures and the timing pressures. If as far as there is certain data not made available and there is a deadline you need to sign, come what may, then maybe issue disclaimers wherever you can, and issue disclaimers, not just issuing disclaimers for the sake of it, but yes, you have given the client a sufficient chance to give information, and despite all the follow-up, the client has not given the information. So this is where your experience, that's what the word experienced auditor comes in, and this is where you'll have to really be very objective and clear about it. So the next is discussion, consultation, evaluation, and documentation. So one is whatever is the discussion which have taken place with the management, whatever is the consulting you have done with maybe some other people, some other chartered accountants, taken opinions, just take a review, just take some written communications of it, just take representations, just take those opinions, and how you have evaluated. The entire evaluation process needs to be documented, and it needs to be basically streamlined to be in touch with these issues. So that's where we come to another area, work performance. Now, if there is a difference of opinion, now one is we face differences of opinion in routine manner across the audit. So you feel you need to qualify, the client feels you should not qualify. Or you feel this is a particular way and you feel this is something to be expressed, the client doesn't feel so, or there might be disagreements even between the teams as far as a particular evaluation is concerned. Now, it's not just that you document this as a part of SA 230 because this is an issue. So please be on this. This is an issue which needs to be documented as a transactional issue specific to that audit. So you document what was that issue. So let's take very brief whether an account needs to be classified as an NP or not. You may take or there is a provision which needs to be made for impairment or enhanced depreciation loss or the useful life. You feel useful life is lower, client feels it's higher, or within your team somebody feels no, you feel it's 5 years, the client feels 7, it's 7 years, your chartered accountant feels 6 years. So finally you would decide what it is based on some criteria and you will document it that if you have taken 6 years as a Y media, then this is how you have taken. Yes, the client has also agreed, you have agreed or whatever it is. But this is as far as that particular client is concerned. I am talking of a process. As a process, if there is a difference of opinion between the client or between your teams, then how would you resolve it? So one is if you would discuss it, you would document it, you would take the path of maybe the least resistance, or you would take a midway path, or you would make it win-win for all. So what would be the parameters in which you would resolve these differences is what needs to be documented as an SQC policy. What you have documented is something as a result of the SA 220 or SA 230. But as a policy which is generic, that generic policy should contain how you would resolve differences of opinions. And technically, the quality control review. So each audit should have a working partner, should have a review partner, and he should have a quality control review partner. So how does the quality control review partner takes an objective view of that? So how would this issue first be resolved within the teams, within the working partner? Then whether there is a need for the review partner or the quality control partner to come in, this is where it would happen. And then what's the criteria you take for evaluation? So that criteria has to be something which needs to be documented. Now, if you go in depth in the SQC, you'll see some criteria which would be laid down as an example, and that is where you will need to document when you are documenting it. If you see the SQC, you could clearly make a policy around that. So maybe as I say, as a prelude to this, if a lot of firms do not have a structured SQC in place, maybe you could have a workshop where you actually take down, you go through a sample, somebody goes through a sample SQC policy, and then that's shared, and that's maybe customized and tailor-made to basically the firm which is there. Or you could have this appendix or the checklist or the illustrations which are given in SQC 1 in the material which is given by the institute is what can be really picked up. Or maybe even from this template, you could pick up a lot of these points and just jot down in a few sentences what is your firm's policy for each one of these. So just document this, and just you could have one chartered accountant reviewing another's work, and you could have for your entire team of maybe 40, 50, 60, whoever is attending, then you divide it into groups of 2. One is doing it, one is reviewing it. For if it's a proprietary firm, they could just do it, and they should just have an SQC in place which would stand the test of all laws, all peer reviewers, and all quality controllers. So one is just have this. Now, how do you document engagement risk? How do you document unusual circumstances? So what are unusual circumstances? Have unusual circumstances come in. How would you react to this? How would you really, if you need to increase your manpower, if you really need to increase skilled manpower, how would you immediately do that course correction? How would you get professional opinion if you don't have the skill sets to do it? This is what we do. If we face this situation, it's just we just have a phone call away. It's something like if I have any issue, maybe in your case, maybe you could just phone Ranjit and maybe get a solution. You could just phone Deepa and ask for a solution and get it. But that you would turn to a Ranjit or a Deepa for a solution should be a part of your SQC policy. That yes, in case there is an issue, yes, I would go into my SIRC branch chairman, or I will speak with the vice chairman or the treasurer or the secretary, or these are the firms where these are experts in this say, or I would consult my central council representative on this, who's a part of ASP. So there would be various ways in which I would de-risk myself from the engagement risk by documenting these unusual circumstances, and I would get public opinion, professional public opinion on this. So this is what is basically I would need to document. Then even who is a reviewer? Is he eligible? Is he qualified to be a reviewer? So what are the qualifications you would need from a reviewer? This is how the reviewer will review the work. This is what will all come as a part of your SQC policy. So it's all about documentation, all about confidentiality, all about safe custody, all about integrity, all about accessibility, all about retrievability, and all about retention. So one is confidentiality. The documentation is confidential. It can't, it's about a client. It has to be in your safe custody, not available to anybody. Anybody should not have access to it. So confidentiality, safe custody, yes, it has to be under your lock and key. It can't just anybody can come in and just that's an open file. You can come in your office, you are not there, and just go pick up a file and go and read all this here. So it has to be in absolute safe custody. Integrity is paramount. So the point is what you are documenting has to be for a particular specific restricted of use clause, and it can't be used for any other purposes to harm the client in any way. Accessibility, yes, you should be able to access it at all times, whenever needed. Again, accessibility will mean retrievability whenever you need, if it's kept in a godown or it's kept on the cloud or in a soft copy somewhere, wherever. And then the retention periods as prescribed by the institute, 7 years, or in some special cases, 10 years. So all these retention period or the periods you will have to document and keep that particular data. Now the issues on monitoring. How do you monitor? So very clear, monitoring can't be for a small period of time. The monitoring has to be an ongoing evaluation. And when I'm talking of an ongoing evaluation, one is the two things. One is an ongoing evaluation as part of the audit assignment is concerned, and an ongoing evaluation of the competencies, capabilities of the teams which are concerned. So the training has to be ongoing. The client retentionship or acceptance will come at a stage when you are accepting a retentionship. But when there are any issues, integrity issues which come in when you have to give up a client relationship suddenly and in between, when an auditor resigns because of certain issues, which is very commonplace now. So this evaluation has to be ongoing. I mean, if there are any deficiencies noted, what is the corrective action which is taken? So what is your policy on taking corrective action? So it's not that there is a deficiency which is happening at a particular audit and you have taken corrective action against this. That's as far as a specific document. So that is where your SQC 1 will differ from an SA 220. And SQC 1 will stand the test of all assignments. It is generic to all assignments which a firm does, maybe audit assignments, review assignments, certification assignments. It's all about quality. It talks about quality as a principle. It's rule based. SQC is rule based. Whereas your SA 220, when applied to a specific audit, it becomes audit based. It is limited to that specific client. SQC is not limited to a client. SQC becomes applicable to all clients, current or what clients you would like to have in future. So SQC is to that extent very, very broad based. Then an SA 220, though the principles what SA 220 will apply to a specific audit assignment will be the same principles which SQC would apply in generic to all clients. So that's again a specific difference between SQC and SA 220. So if you have finished SQC, SA 220 becomes much more easier to go into. So if there are changes in quality control procedures over a point of time, so you have a quality control policy maybe framed in 2019. What are the changes it has undergone in 2020? What is the changes it has undergone in 2021? So like all policies in our client's place, especially banks, insurance companies, mutual funds, broking companies, have an annual review. Do we have an annual review of our own quality control policy? Who reviews it? And if what are the changes? How are these changes made in the quality control policy? Is it that the policy is amended afresh, or is it that just the amendments are attached to the quality control policy which was framed originally, and it's something which just forms a part of the original policy? So one is look into the changes. Then any enhancements which are needed in training, compensation, documentation, maybe disciplinary action which needs to be taken. Again, these needs to be how do you deal with complaints and allegations which are made against you, or which are made within teams against teams, or if there's somebody who is grossly negligent, how do you actually take disciplinary action against him? If somebody has leaked client confidential information, or somebody who's done insider trading, what is, or somebody who's not behaving appropriately with the client. So what is the disciplinary action you are taking against him? What is the policy of taking disciplinary action? Again, in I would say a lot of firms, though they would go on a case-to-case basis and react on the situation, I really don't think there is a policy which is framed. Though the action which they finally take would be very rational, it would be very logical, it would be very fair, it would be just, it would be equitable, it would be within the legal canons of all justice. Though this is done on a case-to-case basis, that you would be just, that you would be fair, that you would be equitable, that you would give the accused a fair chance in a trial, that you will hear his side of the story too. Then there will be an unbiased panel. There will be no judgment. It will be all done as per legal due process of law. That is what needs to be documented, that this is what is your policy. So what needs to be understood here is SQC is all about documentation, is all about what you actually do when you are supposed to do that thing, or when that thing turns up to you in a particular manner. So suppose there is some employee who's basically leaking out your client secrets to a company, and now you've come to know of it. What action will you take against your employee? Now, what action you will take against that employee is the current manner of handling this. But do you have a policy that how you will handle such incidents? Now, that's what is your policy going to talk about. That's what is your SQC going to talk about. That's what your SQC requires you to talk about. And that's what it is all about. So just bear in mind that this is not just theory. It's basically a structure. And when you are making a theory, when you're making a policy, you're actually applying your mind, because when you're doing this policy, it's a combined effect of best practice thinking of a lot of heads which have gone in. So now when you're looking at an SQC1 which is coming, you just look at the SQC1, you just look at the forward, you just see the number of people who have brainstormed into some of the best audit brains in the country, have joined hands together and collaborated to actually draft the SQC. Now, once the SQC is drafted, it is sent to various regions, it is sent publicly on the CA platform for comments. You will get comments, feedback from all over the country. And as you know, feedback is extremely powerful. So those feedbacks are considered. Then the people who have drafted it, they make the necessary and appropriate changes, whether this has to be accepted or ignored. So the decision is theirs, but they would finally consider all feedbacks, and then getting these feedbacks, they would draft the policy. Then post this policy, it will be approved by the ASB, put to the larger Central Council committee to approve it. They will also read it with the international standards of similar pronouncements which are there, and the similarities and the differences. If there are differences, why should the differences still be there? So there's enough due diligence and application of mind when a policy is made. Similarly, when you are making a policy, even if it's a proprietary policy, technically for a proprietary firm, ideally the proprietary firm can easily get that vetted from some other proprietary firm, or the two policies of their firms can be looked into. They can jointly sit and make one policy, or as I said the SIRC chapter or the study circle can come together and make an SQC, a revised, refined SQC for all firms after taking into impact. Or maybe each firm can do one of the 6 elements of that policy, which can be a standard template which somebody can standardizedly follow with maybe his amendments, or based on the facts and circumstances or the peculiar characteristics of his firm. So each one may follow, as you say, the kind of ingredients which one likes. So you have a buffet, within that you choose what you like. So you have the institute also has given the SQC indexes, the templates. You choose what suits you. You choose what is applicable to you. In fact, make further additions if needed, and then come out with a policy of your own which tackles all these parts. So the 6 elements what we looked at is leadership, ethical requirements, acceptance and continuance of client relationships and specific engagements, human resources, engagement performance, and monitoring. So LEAHEM, that's it. Leadership responsibilities, ethical requirements, acceptance and continuance, human resources, the performance, and the monitoring. You need to have policies of all that. So this is what your quality control is all about. But it would vary from firm to firm, as I said, depending on the suitability and appropriateness of each firm. So maybe for a proprietary firm, it would be different. For a partnership firm, it would be different. For a LLP, it would be different. Again, it would be different for a firm depending on the size, as I said, the composition, again, the services rendered. So some firm may be only into taxation. Some firm will be into taxation, both direct, indirect taxes. Some firms would be not just into taxation. Some firm would be into even audits. Audits, it could be concurrent audits, stock audits, it could be internal audits, it could be various kinds of audit, it could be certifications, it could be review engagements, it could be certifying the prospectuses, or certifying a lot of things, the net worth. It could be various assignments which would be there. So depending on the services rendered, the nature of clients, so whether your clients are proprietors or partnerships or private limited companies or listed entities or foreign entities, it would all depend on the quality control. It would all depend on the staff you need, the skill sets you need, the training you need, the professional support you need, the infrastructure you will need. So again, it will depend on not just the number, nature of the employees, the contracted employees, the professionals on roll, the age of the employees, the composition of the employees, the gender bias complaint, the geographical location of your branches, the geographical location of even where your people stay, the areas where you have your offices, where your partners stay. There'll be a lot of factors which would come in when you design and quality control, which has to take into impact all the aspects. It's basically you need to do a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses. It's not weaknesses, opportunities, and strengths. So this is where you would need to do a lot of these things. Ideally, get this QC design. Now, one great thing which the institute has also done is have an implementation guide for SQC. Now, this implementation guide is one which is giving us how do we actually go about implementing the SQC, and that SQC is all about one that you give a confirmation every year about independence from your partners and from your professionals about any of the clients, that they are independent of each one of the clients. So the policy is on independence. The SQC clearly gives you directions that you should have policies on independence, and it also gives you how you go about framing these independence policies and how these policies need to be framed. There's enough material. You could just pick that up and frame an independence policy in about half an hour. Then you have the client engagement and continuance form. So what are the parameters you need to look into when you go in for client engagement and continuance? So this is where you need to fill up and have it for that specific client engagement. Then engagement planning memorandum. How do you go about planning your engagement? So right from the day you start, maybe it's a 2-month audit. How would you actually flow? What is the stage that you would do your final review? What is the date you would issue the draft report? What is the time limit you have kept for discussions? What is the time limit if there are branches? What are the dates you have fixed for your outstation audits? Or if you don't need to go, how you're planning to do various geographical areas? Or where does one person who is an expert, if you're calling him in, at what stage you call him? At what stage, if there are multiple overlapping audits, what stages some person goes for some other audit or comes back, or maybe somebody, I think the best is somebody going on exam leave, medical leave, or some leave which is intimated before that, or maybe how do you manage disruptions now that exams went in for a toss, they were basically postponed. As a result, your personnel who were working were on exam leave. So lots of issues you need to plan as regards the engagement planning. Then how exactly you summarize the engagement, what took place. So there's an engagement summary memorandum, and there's a clear-cut firm quality control checklist. Simple. The institute has given you all of these on a platform. Just read it and just follow it and just use it to your advantage to make a firm quality control. And there are, if you see, there are various things which have been given. We'll just take it. I'll just take a minute break before I go in the final SQC1 policies which have been drafted by the institute. So any questions at this stage?
No, sir, no questions.
So is it no questions? I'm being quite what you could say, very effective in what I'm communicating, or is it so complex that there are no questions? So there's absolute clarity or lack of clarity. So how do I interpret?
I would say the first one, sir.
Okay.
It's definitely clarity.
But one is, I would just like a lot of people to unmute, and I would just need one view is do because I've got this as a feedback, because a lot of chartered accountants, especially proprietary firms, or maybe 1 or 2 partner firms, who are quite many in this country, that they feel that this is quite an onerous documentation task. So what is the view here, which maybe if somebody asks me as a question, maybe I would have taken this up, but I'm preempting this question because this has come to me many times. How many of these think that this is quite onerous? Though when if you look at it, this is common sense.
It is pretty difficult, sir, especially like you were talking about HR policies. For a firm like mine, I don't intend to recruit anybody in the first place. I mean, a chartered accountant, that is.
No, fine. So what I'm saying is that even if you don't intend to recruit, if you
then it becomes pretty cumbersome to implement SQC1 in complete toto.
Okay. So technically, let us say, now let me take this as an example and go ahead. if let's say you are a proprietary firm where you are working individual, let us say you don't have a chartered accountant in the payroll, but maybe you have articles or you have employees. Or
I do have articles and employees, yes.
yeah, so you have articles, you have employees. So articles, the policies is what will be basically governed by the institute policies on recruitment. But still on employees, what employees you will recruit, how you will compensate them. How, it's not just on professionals, it's general applicable to employees also. So that's one. The second is what is when you're talking of recruitment, it's when you're talking of a competency, when you're talking of the time devoted to it, upgradation of skills, it will not just apply to the employees, it will also apply to the main partner of the firm. So whether one, he has completed his CPE, whether that CPE is in that specific area in which he is practicing. So one, if somebody is doing bank audits, so has he basically done a certificate course on concurrent audit of banks, or if he's into frauds and forensic, whether he's done that course, or if he's into information security, whether he's done this course or attended any of these seminars to get updated, or then he has a fallback on any professional. So I may not be IT savvy, but if there is any IT work, I would take the services of my IT partner. I'm not tax savvy, so I would take specific services of my tax partner for certain things. Or in certain complex Ind AS or something, I would take the services of a partner who's either savvy in this. So either I have a partner whom I fall back upon, or then I take the services of fellow chartered accountants. So it's also teamwork, collaboration, which happens throughout. So how do I actually get this teamwork? And how do I actually, even by a one-liner documentation or a two-liner documentation, that wherever maybe the skill sets are interpreted as not being strong enough, or where we feel, yes, we feel the need for somebody to be a second line of defense, then we would hire services or we would consult fellow professionals and take their opinions or take that. So we take that informally. How do we give it a slightly formal structure? So SQC 1 is nothing but giving a formality to whatever we are currently doing in firm. So that's what it's all about. Let's look at specific policies which on leadership responsibility, which the implementation guide has specifically stated. So they have stated you should have policies on these 5 things. So one is a clear-cut policy statement that the firm's managing partner is the ultimate responsibility, or he is ultimately responsible for managing quality control. So that's my policy number 1 on leadership. Policy number 2 is that commercial considerations will not override the quality of my work performed. So I will not cut corners if the fees are lower. I will not accept a fee if it's, I will not accept an assignment if it's the fee is low. But having accepted an assignment for whatever fee I have quoted, if I subsequently find out that the work is much cumbersome and much more complex and more time consuming, I will not cut corners and I will not compromise on my quality, though I might make a loss on one assignment. The third is the quality control which is developed and implemented will be operated by personnel with sufficient and appropriate experience, authority, and ability. So it's that I would employ people who are sufficiently and appropriately experienced, who have the necessary authority and ability. Then it says that I will have HR policies on evaluation, compensation, and incentivization, which will demonstrate my overarching commitment to quality control. And what I'm saying is that I will employ appropriate and sufficient resources to develop, communicate, and support my quality control policies and procedures. So this is something is my leadership responsibility vision policies which I will make. These are the 5 leadership responsibilities policies which will be there. Anything clear? I think you could just have this straight.
One question has been posted. If we can read it out for you. If the auditor is also preparing the financial statements, is there any restriction as per SA? If not, do we need to document it separately in our working papers?
I didn't get you. If the auditor is preparing the financial statement, it means easy an accountant.
Yes. For
Technically,
small concerns where you actually prepare the financials and also prepare the audit report.
so I would say technically have somebody on your staff as the accountant, have him prepare that and draw the line and then technically audit it. Ideally, if you are drawing it, that's what becomes self-review. That's what is, if you look at the code of ethics, technically, and I'm being technical, I'm being an academic, I'm being a theoretical guy, but I would also give you a suggestion that let somebody, maybe from your own team only, but yes, for this assignment, he's the accountant who's doing this, and that's where it ends. Your role starts when the accounts are given to you. Simple. Otherwise, technically, if somebody, that's what I said, at a practical level, a peer reviewer will ignore this because this is the practical difficulties of the profession. This is what a small firm is all about. That's where now the NFRA is coming because of these, that you don't even do an audit in these cases. So, but that's also not fair on the profession. But yes, somewhere down the line, I think to clearly interpret this, you need to have somebody as an accountant on paper. His role will end when he will give you the accounts for audit, because that's what happens, right? The management prepares the account, and that's what we state in management responsibility, right? These have been prepared by the management. So one, again, we are contradicting what we are stating. Similar like what we stated is accounts are prepared in adherence to the standards of auditing. It's just a statement that is there because it is there. It is posted by us. We really don't mean it. So I would say just draw the line very practically. Let somebody who's be there that he's the accountant. There can be a engagement letter given to him that this is the fee or whatever it is, fee or whatever, that he's the accountant. He has prepared the accounts, and then it has been given by the proprietor and the accountant for you to audit. So technically, whoever is the accountant, that guy can be relieved of the audit. That you can manage by paperwork. But have that paperwork. So technically, he may be involved in the audit, but on official records, his name should not be available or known as an auditee who has done the audit. He's an accountant. He's done the accounts technically. So you'll have to manage that paperwork, but that's practical. You can't have that. Okay, I'm the accountant and have on official record that there is a threat of self-review. So then there is effectively what we say is an auditor is a checker. The checker doesn't become here I am a maker. I'm just making and submitting it. There is no checker. Fine, clear. Any questions? I think good question. I think very practical question.
So far that's the only question.
Fine. I hope he's clear with the answer.
Yes, CA Ravinath, if you could just write to us on that.
So ideally what I'm saying is, if suppose it's a small firm, it will not come up for quality review. But if it comes up for quality review, he can't say that I was the accountant and I was the auditor. Or he can't say that the person who did the account was the auditor, was a part of my audit team also. So technically that self-review threat, he's only certifying that there is a self-review threat. And he can't make a bill for accounting and make a bill for auditing. He can include that accounting bill as a bill for auditing. So this is just off record. He can make the bill for auditing and accounting as an auditing bill, but can't make a separate bill for accounting and auditing, because he's something like he's giving evidence against himself by making two bills. See, I would based on my practical experience have solutions for everything to meet the essays. Because I've been very closely involved. I've spoken on the essays. But yes, there are practical considerations in small firms where you can't avoid it. But don't keep evidence against yourself where you are only making a bill for accounting X amount and a bill for auditing by the same firm. So there are a lot of CAs where they still do it. There is still a conflict of interest where they make a bill on the name of their wife that she's, or the husband who is an accountant, and an accounting bill, or a bill from some relative as an accountant. So that's fine. That's the way the Indian jugaad works. But that's still acceptable. If you're making the same bill for an accountant in the same firm and the same bill as an auditor in the same firm, there's obviously a conflict of interest. And you can't review your own work. Fine. So I believe when I was a chartered accountant, and a lot of you were a chartered accountant could not be LIC agent or something. So they used to have a lot of these LIC agencies in their sister's name, brother's name, father's name, mother's name, wife's name. Directly a CA could not be involved. So there were these wire medias which they were adopting. So maybe you'll have to use something which is practical. You can't do it in your own name. That's the only thing. Fine. Right. Ethical requirements. So I have a vision statement, which is a requirement which is specifically stated in my ethical policy should state that my personnel adhere to the ethical requirements as set in the code of ethics. So you get it signed from all the chartered accountants who are there in your firm. I have procedures in place to communicate independence requirements to personnel. I have policies in place to identify and evaluate threats to independence, objectivity, familiarity, and I take action and I apply safeguards to eliminate and reduce these threats to acceptable levels. I would withdraw from engagements wherever independence is compromised. I obtain written annual confirmations from my professional employees and senior staff on independence compliance. I have procedures to confirm independence of another firm performing the engagement. So if there is any other firm who's performing the engagement or maybe who's basically helping me out, I would take, or it's a work of another auditor or the legal opinion I've taken, I would take his independence confirmation that he's independent when he's doing the assignment for me. Then the policies on acceptance, continuance of client engagement and specific relationship is that I would evaluate factors that have a bearing on management integrity and consider the risk associated in providing services in such circumstances. So it's something like you have a look at management integrity. And if you find that the management is not of integrity, then you would not associate from being an auditor of such firms, or what are the risks of being associated in providing services to such firms is what you would look into. So somebody who's a known GST income tax defaulter has been penalized, has been imprisoned, and technically whether you would take up his case, I think the SQC has very clear-cut guidelines that you evaluate the management integrity and still whether you would still like to continue this. So you document the exceptional reasons for you taking up such engagements from such clients. Then I will evaluate the professional competence, capability, and resources of my personnel who would undertake those engagements. I understand the services that I'm performing. That's a very profound statement. I think all chartered accountants would obviously understand the services that they are performing, but yes, in case that you don't understand services, so technically, I really don't know what GST A or B or C is apart from what it means. I really don't know. Even I really don't know how to file tax returns. So if somebody gives me an engagement to file a tax return, I would just not know it because I've never done it. So if I don't understand the service, I will never perform it. Now I've been doing audits on risk, governance, and my A on essays, ethics, whatever I do, I know I'm in a niche. I know my niche. I will do my niche. I would not take assignments which I don't know. I might cut out a sorry figure. My entire reputation for n number of years could be at stake. I might miss out certain things because of basic lack of competency. So why should I take such engagement? Obviously, yes, you will learn on the way, but yes, you should also know the risks that you may not learn on the way, and you might, or there could be at various points of time at a level that has always to be a start. Yes, so at the stages at which we started, support from necessary seniors will always need to be taken. So if suppose something there is I would always advise, so whoever has come to me for advice is whenever there is an engagement whom they don't know, they say obviously you take up that assignment, don't leave any engagement, But yes, you take consultancy of people at appropriate and take that consultancy in writing and document the fact that this is an engagement you have taken for specific reasons, because there's somewhere, some place you need to start, and somewhere you'll get experience along the way. And then you've taken the services of somebody who's an independent senior professional who is completely independent. There's no conflict of interest, and you are relying on his experience. And you can always use this, you can document this, you can tell him that you're documenting, and that person should also be fair and fine with it. So just go on. I have procedures on how I will withdraw from an engagement. Yes, they have to be there. I will document issues if they arise on client relationships. If there are any conflicts with the client, then how I would resolve that. So I would have policies on that. Now, HR policies, the personnel I hire possess the characteristics to perform consistently. I have determined the capabilities and competencies required for an engagement. The capabilities and competencies possessed by an individual are also determined. So what capabilities and competencies I need for an engagement, as well as what I need from the personnel, are also determined. I have assigned responsibilities of personnel to engagements based on their capabilities and competencies, based on their knowledge, skill, abilities, and supervision needed. I am carrying a continuous professional education of personnel so that they can accomplish their responsibilities, and that these personnel have the necessary qualifications to fulfill their responsibilities. Again, there are standards on engagement performance. That engagement performance, the planning meets professionally, regulatory, and firm requirements. This is as per professional standards and regulatory requirements. Review of work is performed by team on timely basis. Completion of assembly of engagement files is on a timely basis. Then the confidentiality, safe custody, integrity, accessibility, and recoverability of engagement documentation is maintained at all times. So this is what I need to specifically state as an EP. Then retention of documents for required periods, 7 years, 10 years, as the case may be. Consultation as and when appropriate has taken place. Appropriate resources are available for consultation. So I have taken consultations as and when required and from appropriate people. All relevant facts are provided to the consultants. The discussions which are held with the consultants are documented, and conclusions which are resulting and which have come up from the discussions have been adequately implemented. So this is what I would need to document when it comes to hiring of consultants, and this is where we would be taking a lot of advice informally. This is what the SQC clearly says, that you formally document a lot of things which you do it informally. So if I were to put SQC in one small sentence, do things formally what you are doing currently informal. I think that sums up in the nutshell what SQC 1 is all about. It's all about giving a formality and a structure and a documented manner of what we do, why we do, when we do, how we do, and where we do. So that's it. If I were to even conclude at this stage, that's what it's all about. But let's see some technical points even on others. When we go ahead, we need to have SQC 2 also, and SQC 220, and the planning year also. So again, differences of opinions are resolved before reports are signed. I've set the criteria for quality review. What is the quality review which is done for an engagement? The completion of all that criteria is complete before the accounts are signed. And what is the nature, timing, and extent of the documentation which is required and the work to be performed for the quality control review is established. And who will be the quality control reviewer? That also is established. And why he should be a quality control reviewer? Does he have the necessary academic qualifications, capabilities, and competencies to be a QC reviewer? Is what I would need to establish. Monitoring, the last. I'm assigning responsibility for monitoring process to competent individuals. So again, this is on competency. The monitoring has to be sufficiently comprehensive, and it has to adhere to all the applicable professional standards, QC controls, policies, procedures. I need to communicate annually or even earlier on deficiencies which I have noted in the quality control process, and whatever is the recommended remedial action, I will communicate it to the relevant engagement partner and the teams. And as a result of the monitoring which I have done, what is the real actionable which is emanating out of it? That needs to be communicated. So if the monitoring needs to be effective, then it needs to communicate. If it needs to communicate, it needs to effectively tell out what is wrong, and that wrong has to be rectified. So it's something like what we commonly call the cow fell in the ditch theory. If the cow falls in the ditch, get the cow out of the ditch in the first place. Second, find out why the cow fell in the ditch. And third, do all things to ensure that the cow doesn't fall in the ditch again. So as a result of the monitoring, if you find any drawbacks, then set that right so that these drawbacks don't happen again. It's not just correcting the error. It's going to the root cause, the core, finding out why it takes place and ensuring that you do all acts to ensure that this doesn't happen again. So that's what is monitoring. All complaints, allegations are appropriately dealt with. All element of QC is appropriately documented. Retention of these documents is as per appropriate periods as per regulatory, and peer reviewed under ICAI peer review process. Even if it's not mandatory, you can do it voluntarily. So that could be a part of the policy. I think it's always better to get yourself peer reviewed voluntarily, and maybe you'll benefit from the feedback, advice, and wisdom of or peer reviews. So that's what SQC 1 is all about. We're at 5:30. Any questions at this stage?
No, sir.
Fine. So let's take a minute break and start.
Sure, sir.
So we're almost at the end of it. So maybe another 15-20 minutes, because SQC included all of documentation. So SA 220 is nothing but a repeat of SQC 1. So again, it's a common question. What is the difference between SQC 1 and SA 220? So SQC talks of maintaining system at the firm level. So achieving quality in audit is the ultimate objective of SQC 1. And SQC is more broad-based in application. Whereas SA 220 talks of implementation. At an assignment level, it's more specific. SA 220 applies only to audits of HFS. And SA 220 will address the responsibilities of the engagement quality control reviewer. Conceptually, definitions are all the same because quality is quality. SA 220 talks of quality at a specific assignment level, how you will maintain and implement the quality which you have already stated as your goal in your broad-based SQC. SQC applies universally. SQC has to be embedded, ingrained in your core. So once SQC 1 is there ingrained, SA 220 is just the what you get the end result. It's the byproduct. So SA 220 has the same set of things. Now, 1. The skills of an accountant. Now, when it's accountant, this is a classic definition of an accountant, which is given by Montgomery, which is quoted in the preamble of the SQC implementation guide. The skills of an accountant can always be ascertained by an inspection of his working papers. So when he means an accountant, he means an auditor here. So the skills of an auditor, I would just modify because that's what he meant maybe when he said this maybe 150 or 200 years ago. It can always be ascertained by an inspection of his work papers. And that's what documentation is all about work papers or working papers. And structured working papers, it's not all rough rubbish, what technically something in pen we scribble or our articles have scribbled and just put it. And on some at times we've not even taken care to see that the pages where we have received is something of which is junk material, which is some wrong printing which has happened, which is on one page and on second page where we have made our notes. I think it needs to be fairly properly structured and clean, neat, tidy papers which we need to use. Basics, but I have unfortunately seen it at quite a few places. Again, when I go to any topic, I would look at the dictionary meaning. So you have various dictionaries, Oxford Dictionary, Macmillan, Webster. Documentation means material that provides official information, evidence, or serves as a record. It's a process of classifying and annotating text, photographs, etc. So it's something I can say documentation, the key in one word is a evidence or a record of the work which you did, of the basis on which you examined the books of accounts, and the basis on which you evaluated and stated that the accounts give a true and fair view. When I mean the account, the balance sheet, the P&L, and the cash flow. Now, ISA 230 defines documentation, and this definition of documentation has been adopted by our ICAI also, is that it's a record of audit procedures performed, relevant audit evidence obtained, and conclusions reached. So documentation or work papers is nothing but the audit procedures we perform, the relevant audit evidence we obtain, and the conclusions we reach. And it's nothing but keeping a hard copy, soft copy, or a structured record of the manner in which we finally concluded what we concluded. That's what documentation is all about. Now, that's what is SA 230. No difference in SA 220 and SQC 1. So if you have learned SQC 1, SA 220 is just a cakewalk. So it's something like it's just that it's something which elementarily needs to be done. There is nothing if you've done. If you have an SQC 1, a full-fledged SQC 1, obviously you will implement that at a specific engagement or an assignment level. And that's what you need to do. If you have, you might not have an SQC 1, but you may still have an SA 220 documentation done for a specific assignment. Parallelly, you may have an SQC 1, but you may have generically written something one time, maybe some years back, or got something done from somebody, but specific engagement because of the paucity of time or because of maybe the pandemic and the absence of maybe resources or manpower or whatever reasons, the documentation at an engagement level may not be done. So you will have both cases. You would have SQC 1 well established, SA 220 not done, SA 220 done for a specific engagement, but SQC not done. But technically both are violations. You can't have just an SQC, not an SA 220. You can't have an SA 220, yes, because if that's too small and it's not within the purview of a regulatory audit, then fine, you may not have an SA 220 specifically because it's a small enterprise, but SQC1 obviously you will need to have because it's all pervasive. Alternatively, you can't have an SA for a certain area where you need to have an SA and you don't have an SQC. So just check the correlation of all of these and let's work on that. Now let's go to SA 230. SA 230 is work papers, as we all said. It's a record of evidence obtained, conclusions drawn, evidence of achievement of audit objectives, planning and performance as per SA and legal regulatory requirements. It helps, as we said, in planning, performing, fixing accountability, responsibility, supervision, review, quality control, retention. The definitions are what is audit documentation, what is audit file, what is experienced auditor. And SA 220, that's what the main it says. It states the form, the content, and extent of the documentation which needs to be done based based on the nature and purpose of the assignment. So that's what SA 230 is all about, the form, content, and extent of the documentation which is to be done based on the purpose of this assignment which we are doing. Now, who should we document when we're doing an engagement? Now, this is at an engagement level. What is the nature, timing, and extent of the audit procedures that we did? What were the results of audit procedures performed? And what were the results which were obtained as a result of the audit procedures? So whatever audit procedures, inquiry, calculation, verification, reconciliation, balance confirmation, physical verification, ratifications, whatever could be computation, ratio analysis, whatever we did, audit procedures, inquiries from management, representations from management, whatever we did, what was the result of the audit procedures we performed, and what were the results which we applied while making conclusions in our audit. What were the significant matters which arose during the audit? Based on this, a few of them may form part of CAM. What were the matters which arose after the date of the audit report, if there are anything which is there? So maybe in banks, you have time between the signing and the issuance of an LFAR. So what matters arose after the date of audit report, but maybe before another regulatory inspection is there, or if the LFAR is issued. One, very clear, these documents have to be assembled before signing, and these have to be retained for a set number of years, 7 or 10 as the case may be. Now, you may have this in hard copy or soft copy, combination of both. So one, what should the documentation contain? One, the basic is the engagement and the acceptance correspondence. So your first is the basic documentation. The work paper should have a copy of the appointment letter and your acceptance letter. Then in that appointment letter, what are your actionables which are to be done? What are the deadlines? And what is your audit program? What are the checklists? What are the risk assessment you did under SA 315? What are the abstract or copies of records that you took? So maybe you maybe if it's a statutory audit, you took the last year's long-form audit report. You took the last year's statutory audit report. If maybe there was an RBI inspection, you took copies of that. If there are various other stock audits, there are information security audits, or whatever, vigilance reports, or legal reports, whatever, you would take copies of all of that. That would be your work papers, basically. What were the basis analysis you did, the correspondences you made with management, the verifications you did. So if it's a bank branch audit, you did cash verification, then the cash verification certificates, the minutes of discussions you had with management, the internal external reports of other auditors, regulators, experts, valuers. So all the confirmations, reconciliations, representations, valuations, any specific requirement of regulations, laws, and essays. So essays, a lot of essays talk of documentation. We'll quickly go on to that. Each essay talks of particular documentation. So it's not that essay 230 is talking of essay documentation. Essay 230, like an SQC, lays the basic principle. As essay 230 is an overarching framework, whereas all other essays will specifically give you what is to be documented. So maybe your essay 530 audit sampling will tell you to document what is the sample size you have selected. Why this sample size? Your materiality will tell you to document what is the materiality level you have determined for a balance sheet item, for a P&L item, in individual or in aggregate. Your essay 580 will clearly talk of written representations. Your essay 315 will talk of risk assessment. Your essay 330 will talk of auditor's response to assessed risk. Essay 550 will clearly talk of related party transactions. Essay 570 will clearly talk on evaluation of a going concern concept. So all these essays will clearly talk of something and will clearly have a lot of things to document. Essay 240 will talk of fraud and error. Essay 600 is using the work of another auditor or an expert. So you need to document the evaluation you did to ensure that whoever did that audit was competent to do it. SA 700 series talks of all qualifications. So how would you discuss a qualification with the management? What will you include in CAM? What will you include in other matter? What will you include in emphasis of matter? All these needs to be documented. And this is broadly covered as a framework in SA 230, but it's specifically covered in detail in each of these individual essays. So Essay 230, I to document. What to document will be in the individual essays which we talked about. What to document will be in the individual essays. Why to document? The overarching framework will be in essay 230. So as we say, it's the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, what you call it, of all standards of auditing. Essay 230 is the heart. It's the heart and soul that you need to adhere to. So it's simple. Show me the papers. Show me the work papers. Simple. Peer reviewer आके एक ही चीज पूछेगा, मुझे वर्क पेपर बताओ. Simple. पहले मुझे SQC 1 policy दिखाओ form की on policy. Second, now show me the work. So these are the two. He will simply ask 10-minute job. I think if it's a great peer reviewer, within 10 minutes he can form an opinion. I think that's what he said. The quality of the skill or the quality of an accountant will be known by the quality of his work papers. And within that, within the first 5-10 minutes of asking the right questions, a peer reviewer can specifically know whether the firm is really following quality or is really following documented quality. Now, quality in action is one thing, quality in documentation is another thing. So you would have done a lot of quality. You would be really a extremely high intellect individual and a professional, and you would have done the work with all due skill and care. And you would be an expert in that area. But you would not have documented stuff, it may still go against you. At the same time, if you have documented stuff and done a reasonable job, it will still help you. Finally, if you have not done a great job at all anywhere, I think it will backfire everywhere. So it's not that you just do quality just for the sake of quality and document things, or get somebody as a professional or an external professional to document it for you. You can as well get it documented, because what is documented is just a letter. In spirit, you need to follow it. So you might have a very rosy and a very utopian SQC policy, but if you care a hoot for it and you're not following it at all, then it just doesn't matter whether you have it or not have it. So it's better not to have something, but do something which is great, so that there is no divergence or there is no remarks anywhere. But said and done, it would be what you call Sone pe suhaga if you have a great policy also and follow it up with further brilliant work. So that's what should be the final goal or the motive or the purpose of all chartered accountants. And again, you have the implementation guide. Again, essay 230, very clear cut. The institute implementation guide is just a very practical way. So auditor needs to satisfy himself first, because he says according to the best of his information and explanations given to him. So is he satisfied that what he's done is a good job? So is he that he's just typing those lines, or is he just reading this aloud to himself, whether he's really got the best of the information and explanations given to him? At certain points of time, a lot of these words, they have very deep, profound meanings, but we really don't look into it with that depth. We just cut paste it, or we just post it because they are sort of a template which needs to be followed. So don't make this a generic general rule. Make it something which you are typing it individually based on each balance sheet, and because it is actually meant and done. Now the implementation guide has about 37 FAQs. It has a 9-point checklist for documentation. It has given an illustrative work paper format. There are 15 or 16 case studies which are there. So just read through the implementation guide. I think that will just help you make anything on SA and that SQC, the implementation checklist. I think they are great enough. You can use this PPT and superimpose the implementation guides, the actual checklists, and really you have something which can stand the test of any peer review. Specific documentation, I said SA 220, we discussed SA 240, fraud and error, 250, 216, 265, all on communications. 300, 315, 320, 330, 320 materiality, 330 sampling, 540 audit evidence, 550 related parties, 570 going concern, the 600, 610 using the work of another auditor or using the work of an expert. 701 is basically on the way an audit report is to be structured. So all these needs to be documented specifically as per the requirements of the SA. One thing is the auditor owns the work papers. It's unless as required by law that he has to part it, then only he will require to part it. Otherwise, it is his possession, his custody, and has to be kept safe and retained for 7 years. So he may hand over part of the work papers to client on discretion if his independence is not impacted or his work performance is not undermined. So very specific, if he's handing it over, then he has to take care and document that these two aspects are not impacted or impaired in any way. Now the impact of the COVID pandemic. I think implications of COVID pandemic for auditors, the work related to going concern has taken a big hit. Discontinuing operations, AS24, again a big hit. So auditor will need to really evaluate that because there is a material and inherent uncertainty still. I believe last when cases were quite down in a lot of the country, Kerala had still a few cases. So I really don't know the situation now there. But yes, maybe there could be a lot of material and inherent uncertainty among a lot of things. So one needs to really have either what they say is an enhanced or new audit material in matters which should be there, or what is the length of the period of going concern assessment, what you are doing, whether it's for the immediate short term, you are saying that it's discontinued, but yes, when things come up, things will improve and things will change. So you are qualifying a GC for a limited aspect, or you are giving a disclaimer, you really don't know what could be the impact. So this is one, there is a guidance note which the institute has given on the implications of COVID pandemic for auditors work related to going concern. And there is an advisory on the impact of coronavirus on financial reporting and auditors consideration. So these two, one needs to have a look. Again, in the advisory, it's very clear for all chartered accountants to have enhanced skepticism. So that's what the ultimate guidance is, enhanced skepticism. As we say in the Institute's preamble, this is the line which I saw that on reaching God, all progress ends. So excellence is an ever-moving target. We are continuously learning. We are students at all points of time. I think the more you learn that you still have a lot to learn. I would have spent much more on my education in the last 5 years than I would have done it in the first 25 years of my life till I became a chartered accountant and a lawyer. A lot of skills one needs to acquire now. I think one needs to, what I say, always be useful, relevant at all times. So I use this acronym HURT-MAD. Stay helpful, useful, and relevant at all times to make a difference. So I use this MAD, make a difference. HURT-MAD, HURT, helpful, useful, and relevant with your talent at all times, and with your CCTV is what I use is your competency, credibility, trust, and value and values you bring on the table. So you are as good as your last audit. You are as bad as one silly mistake. Assumptions are the mother of all goof-ups. I think in God we trust, rest we audit. Difficult times, changing perceptions of regulators. We are living in a VUCA world. It's a very complex, uncertain, volatile, and ambiguous world. I think we need to be what. There's one more area which I saw in putting in our Western India Regional Council in the chairman's speech. We need to be bold. When he says you brace for the challenge, you be organized, you be competent, and you lead and you take timely decisions. So I think the time is that one needs to be extremely hands-on and glued, and technically be ready for all challenges. Any support, anytime, I'm always there on a phone call. I think my WhatsApp number is available. My email ID is also there. I've shared this presentation. You can just take a copy of it at any point of time. Any guidance needed on any of the SQCs or any of the documentation which is to be done, I'll be always willing to help. Thank you for listening to me for practically almost 2 hours, 45 minutes. And
I hope it was enriching for all of you because you have spent some time which in your life will never come back. So thanks for everything. It was good talking, and I had to also prepare for this, so it also was a learning experience for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. We will all try to remain mad. That is, we'll try to make a difference. And let's see how best even proprietors like me can implement SQC in the full sense of the SQC. Thank you so much for joining Ernakulam branch and taking the session for us and guiding us through. And the interplay between SQC 1 and SA 220 and 230 was also very interesting to watch. Instead of just going plain on one-on-one, you were doing an interplay that is very interesting to watch. Thank you so much for the session.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, dear participants, for joining us. Yes, though the numbers were a little low at the beginning, finally it turned up and we went up to 60 plus at one point of time. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope to see you tomorrow and day after. And I am Branch signing off.
Thank you.